Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another wonderful, fun-filled episode of Watch Me Wrench with your host, Mr. Watch Me Wrench. And again, when I say wonderful and fun-filled, I'm totally being sarcastic. So, in case some of you are wondering what this is, I sold the Corvette and I bought this Jeep Grand Cherokee. No, I'm just kidding. Corvette's right there, sleeping. It's pouring rain outside. She doesn't go out. So, again, this is my 2009 Jeep Grand Cherokee Limited. This has the 5.7 Hemi. The engine is stock. The only thing I ever did to it was I got this Mopar cold air intake. And believe me, this helped out a lot. You could feel the difference in power when you install that. It used to have a Dynomax exhaust system, but that literally only lasted 2 years, and then it rotted away, and it got holes in it. So I took it off and put the stock exhaust back on. But I've never had any problems with this thing. It runs great. And today we're going to change the oil in my WK. This model is considered a WK. So I have the car ready. Prepping the car for me is usually the hardest part, getting it up in the air. As you can see, I have it on some jack stands. And then I always leave the lift if possible. I leave the jack in place for additional support. Now I have all 4 wheels off the ground, but that's because I'm going to rotate the tires as well. So if you're going to change your oil, which is what I'm going to do today, you don't have to elevate the rear. I only have it like this because I'm going to rotate the tires after I change the oil. So the purpose of this video, we're going to show how to change the oil. For those of you who have never done it, on your WK. It's not hard, it's very easy. But I've always had one issue, and that's when you're taking off the oil filter. It kind of makes a mess because of the way it's positioned. But other than that, it's pretty easy. And because it makes a mess, I always put a large piece of cardboard, because I don't want oil all over the floor. You know, my garage is only 2 years old, and I want to keep it clean. So, alright, let me get under the car and I'll show you what you have to do. Okay, so we're underneath the front of the car. I'll just show you guys, and for those of you who've never done this or don't know, so your oil drain plug is located in the back. You can see it right there. It's a 13mm drain plug, and all you need is a ratchet with the 13mm socket. So you have this giant skid plate on the front, and it's basically where that second opening is. You have this one here for the differential, and then you have that opening there. So, as you can see, I have a piece of cardboard down to help catch some of the splashing, and a large oil pan. This car holds, I think, is what, 7.5 quarts of oil, 5W20. Alright, so I'm just going to loosen that one nut, and you just turn it counterclockwise, and that's it. Alright, I'll be back. Okay, so I got the nut out, and it's draining. It's going into the oil pan. Let's go up top for a second. Okay, here's a little tip. This is your oil fill cap. This is where you pour the oil in. This is on the driver's side of the motor. If you unscrew this and you help to introduce air into the top of the motor, the oil will actually drain out faster. So this is probably a common problem, but I have 3 Jeep Grand Cherokees. 2 of them have the Hemis, and on both of them you cannot unscrew the oil fill cap. So what you got to do is, this is a tip, what I do is I take an adjustable wrench and I put it over here like that, and then I use this to turn it. But I don't want to chew it up, so I just put a rag over it. And I go like that. And then I turn it counterclockwise. It's hard to do with one hand. I don't know what it is. It gets so tight. This is ridiculous. Wow. That enough will probably deter some people from doing this job. God. It's so damn tight. I'm telling you. Finally. So I can hear the oil draining out faster now. So that's just one tip. I do that on all my cars. Helps to drain the oil out faster. Oh, and before you start changing the oil, and this applies to basically any cars, you should run the motor. I let it run for like 30 seconds to a minute so that the oil thins out. And this way it'll drain out easier. When you get underneath it, make sure that, nothing's hot under there that's going to burn you. But you should do that before you, elevate the car or get it ready. Alright, I'll be back. So, once the oil finishes draining out, then we'll move on to the oil filter. It's pretty much done now. I see it's still dripping. I don't know if you can see it. I'll give it like 10 minutes. Let it finish dripping, and then we'll go on to the oil filter. Alright, I'll be back. Okay, so we're back underneath the car. Here's your oil drain plug. So I'm going to thread it back in. The oil has basically just slowed down to a very slow drip. So I'm going to thread it in by hand. Always thread in a nut or bolt by hand. And then when you tighten it, you're going to go clockwise. You can use a ratchet or a wrench. It's 13 millimeter. And don't crank on it really hard. Just snug it up tight, because you can strip the threads pretty easily. Hold on one second. Let me see. Okay. So you can see I'm just threading it in by hand. Alright, and then I'll snug it up with the wrench, with the ratchet. Hold on. Okay. Let's wipe it down. So that takes care of that part. Okay, so now we're going to move on to the oil filter. That's the oil filter right there. Right there. You can see the orange base of it. That's a Fram filter. It's pH 2. That's what you need for a 2009 Jeep Grand Cherokee with 5.7 Hemi. It's going to be the same for basically all the Hemis, most likely. But don't quote me on that, so make sure you do your research. So you got to reach up through here, try to grab it, and then turn it. Hold on. And this is what makes a mess, and this is why I don't, they should have done a better job when they designed this. When you take off the filter, it's going to hit this plastic tray right here and drip down, and then the oil will come down. But the oil is going to get on this line here. It's going to get over here on the sway bar. It gets everywhere. This is a little bit messy on this car. So there are two tools you could use. You could use this right here to loosen it, and this is only to loosen it. Basically, when you go counterclockwise, the teeth will grab, the arms will grab the filter, and you could loosen it. Or you could use the old-fashioned oil filter wrench. Or if it's loose enough, you could just loosen it with your hands. So, let me see if this one's loose enough. It's hard to do with only one hand. Alright, I'm going to use this tool. today to loosen it. Basically, you just put it over the base, the top part of the filter. And you would go counterclockwise, but I got to put the phone down to do this. All right, I'll be back. Okay, so I got the oil filter loose with that tool. Now here comes the messy part. So I reach up and I give it a couple turns, and you'll see the oil start to drip. There it goes into the pan. I wait till this slows down before I wait till this flow of oil slows down before I fully remove it. This way it just makes less of a mess because it's on an angle. And you kind of have to wiggle it out of there. Because you're kind of just working, you know, in between this lower radiator hose and this sway bar. This is, you know, the only room you have to work. So that's it up there. Alright, I'll be back. I'll come back when this slows down. Alright, so a couple seconds later it slowed down. Now I'll remove it. This just usually gets messy. Okay. So you gotta kind of pull it through that little opening there. And always check right away. You can see the rubber, there's a rubber seal that goes right there in that groove. The rubber seal usually stays jammed up there. And you can see it right there. So you got to get that out. It usually doesn't really take much effort. Let me try to wipe down this oil before I get it all over my shirt. Right there it is. So I'll just wait for this to finish dripping out and then we'll install the new filter and I'll show you what you have to do. Alright, I'll be back. Okay, so I just unboxed the oil filter. It's a Fram. This is pH2. As you can see, here's the rubber seal. So what you want to do to prep the oil filter before you install it, you want to lubricate this rubber seal, this gasket, with some fresh motor oil. And then what I do is I try to put as much oil in the filter as possible. You can't really put too much. See, like on my Corvette, the filter is sitting straight up. So on the Corvette, I could fill it up to the top and not have to worry. But because this is mounted like this, basically as soon as you tilt it, the oil starts to come out. So you can't put too much, so I usually try to fill it up like 40% of the way. So let me get to it. Just gonna get my finger on some oil, lubricate this part here. Okay, that's pretty well lubricated. I'm going to have to put the phone down, so now I'm going to fill this about 40% of the way with some fresh motor oil. I use Quaker State 5W20. I've always used Quaker State. I mean, they don't pay me to say this, but I've never had an issue. My oldest Jeep has 250,000 miles, and all I've ever used since I've owned it is Quaker State, and I have no issues. So, all right, let me get to it. I'm going to put about 40. I'm going to fill this up about 40% of the way, and then I'm going to hand thread it into place, and I'll be back. Okay, so I got the new oil filter threaded into place. I wiped most of the oil down. Okay, what I do is after I finish up this job, I usually leave cardboard underneath it because you might get a couple of drips from residual oil. I can see some right there coming down now. Alright, so I got it hand tight. So now I'm going to go and I'll use the old-fashioned oil filter wrench, or you could take your hand, but you don't have a really good position to get your hand in there to turn it. To tighten it, normally you just tighten it by hand really as tight as you can. That's good enough. But I'll use this to tighten it up. And as you can see, as you put pressure on this, it tightens this band. But I got to put the phone down to tighten it up. Alright, so I'm just going to give it like a half a turn with this oil filter wrench. Alright, I'll be back. Okay, so I got the oil filter wrench over the filter. It's hard to tell. And basically I just grab the handle and crank down. Sorry for the video, but there's just no room to work in here. I'm sure you get the idea. Alright, that's good enough. Filter's on there, filter's tight. Now I'll go up top and we'll fill the engine. Alright, I'll be back. Okay, so here we are on the driver's side of the motor. I got my funnel in place, and now I'm going to slowly pour the oil in there. Now, I put 7.5 quarts. Some people say they put 7, some people say they put 8. But mine checks out just perfect at 7.5 quarts. Novice, or for the guy who's doing this for the first time, most of these oil jugs have this like clear sight window here so you can see how much oil you have in there. So these hold 5 quarts. I put one of these in. Now I just have to add another 2.5 quarts. So when the oil level falls to here, the 2.5, then I'll stop. Well, this side is quarts, this side is liter. So when it gets here, I will stop. And then at that time, the motor will have 7.5 quarts. Then I will put the car back down on the ground, check the oil, make sure it's good, then start it, let it run a little bit, shut it off, let the oil settle back down to the oil pan, and I'll check it again. And that's basically it. Alright, let me get back to it. I'll be back. Okay, so I finished pouring the oil in. It's got 7.5 quarts. I put this on, hand tight, just turn it clockwise. And that's pretty much it. So now I'll check the oil level on the dipstick, and then I'll get the car on the ground, let it run for a few minutes, shut it off, give it a couple more minutes, let the oil fall down to the oil pan, and then I'll check it again. And when you check it, make sure you don't check this on your driveway, especially if your driveway is pitched on an angle. You have to be level to get an accurate reading. Alright, so let me get to the oil dipstick, which is right there. It's got the oil symbol on it, and it says engine oil, I believe. Oh, it says engine, and then it shows the oil symbol. Alright, I'll be back. Okay, so I just had the car running. I opened up the garage door, let it run a couple minutes. First I had checked the oil. I should add that, like, because the oil filter is not full of oil prior to you starting it, it will show that you have a little more than full on here. But don't be alarmed, that's because the oil filter is empty. But after you start it and it runs, then when you go to check it again, you'll see that the oil filter will, the level on the oil level on the dipstick will drop, and it'll be right at the full line. Even this, you know, this isn't the easiest car to change the oil in. It's not hard, it's just a little messy and time consuming. But even like on this particular year, even the design of the dipstick is crazy. It's this swirly thing, and it's kind of difficult to pull in and out. But, alright, let me check the oil level one more time, and then I'll be back. Okay, so I just checked the oil after the car was running. It's perfectly level. And another thing you want to do is while the car is running, when you do your initial startup, just make sure you don't see any oil pouring out from the bottom of the motor. Basically, if you don't tighten the oil filter, you'll see oil coming out. So just watch out for any oil leaking from the oil filter and from the drain plug. But that's it. So that's how you change the oil on a WK Jeep Grand Cherokee. Alright, if you like this video, please click the like and subscribe button. I would really appreciate it. Thank you for watching. Thank you for your support, guys. Good luck.